Just add bacon. Did you know that it's one of the most versatile flavor enhancers available? Why, it's almost a spice. Today, I'll prepare a hot, hearty soup using some of New England's earliest available ingredients in Making a Mess with the Yankee Camper, bacon and corn chowder.
For our bacon and corn chowder, let's start by putting together the dry ingredients. So we'll need a half a teaspoon of onion powder, a quarter of a teaspoon of garlic powder, a half a teaspoon of butter granules. These are for popcorn, but they give it that butter flavor. A quarter of a teaspoon of thyme, a generous teaspoon of celery flakes, a quarter of a teaspoon of salt, and just a dash of white pepper. If you don't have white pepper, black pepper works just as well. I have the white pepper, so I'm going to use it. The last dry ingredient that you will want is 2 tablespoons of potato flakes. That will help thicken the chowder and continue with that potato flavor. Combine all of those ingredients into a small container with a locking lid, or just a Loctite plastic bag works fine. In addition to the dry ingredients, you'll need an 8 1/4 ounce can of creamed corn. I'm just going to place that corn into my paper bag. You'll also need a 5-ounce can of evaporated milk, a small potato. Don't want to forget to put the dry ingredients in. You'll also need pre-cooked bacon. This is thick cut bacon, and I chose 6 slices. I separated out the 6 slices of bacon and put them into a small plastic container. I'm just going to add the bacon in with the rest of the ingredients. And lastly, as an option, I have some crackers that came with one of my soups that I didn't use. I'm just going to add that into the bag as well. Now I'm all set to make my supper out at the campsite. I'll see you out there.
Look at the food that comes from a hog: ham, pork chops, ribs, bacon, and sausage. Oh, and don't forget the pork rinds. The term pig and hog are often interchangeable, but pigs are typically younger, between 120 to 180 pounds, and under 3 years old. Hogs are older and primarily for breeding. I'll use both these terms to refer to domesticated swine. Pork has been a part of the human diet for over 10,000 years, and swine has moved with Homo sapiens during their expansion globally. Pigs were domesticated as far back as 7,000 years ago. The first pigs were brought to America by Christopher Columbus in 1493, being left to propagate as a food source. As Europeans began to move onto the new continent, they continued to bring pigs with them. By the time the Pilgrims arrived in Plymouth in 1620, some Native Americans in the South were hunting, eating, and using parts of wild boar routinely, but these animals had not advanced as far north as New England. By 1623, however, 50 pigs were counted as part of the Plymouth colony. When John Winthrop arrived in 1630 with his 11 ships and more than 700 Puritans to establish the Massachusetts Bay Colony, he brought with him dogs and cats, along with other domesticated animals, including horses, cattle, goats, sheep, and pigs. It should be known that livestock were often allowed to roam freely unless the town specifically required them to be yoked. This meant that a wooden hoop was placed around the neck and a crosspiece used to prevent the pig or other animal from digging under a fence. Whether free roaming or not, A snout ring would hinder them from rooting in gardens and fields. However, these weren't always effective, and misbehaving swine would sometimes get into neighbors' crops and vegetable patches, causing havoc. Now someone would have to wrangle the beast going hog wild into a holding pen, built by the town for that purpose called a pound, where the animal would be held until the owner paid the fine for allowing the animal to run loose, in addition to compensation for any damage caused by the public nuisance. For pigs, this position was the Hog Reeve, appointed by the town to control rebellious razorback. This was not a position people readily volunteered for, so it became a tradition that at the town meeting held annually throughout New England, the assignment would be bestowed upon the most recent, often unsuspecting, newlywed. With the advancement in progress, this position is no longer required and has been retired in the quaint New England towns and villages. Well, almost all of them. Nestled 10 miles to the southwest of Concord, New Hampshire, lies sleepy Dunbarton. They've been naming a person to deal with wayward pigs for 250 years, and the practice continues to this day, now being mostly ceremonial. The latest to receive this historical honor are Colby Gagne and Rowan Anderson, who were married in October 2024. I hope you never have to deal with swaggering swine, but it's good to know that the task is well in hand should the need arise. Oh, and how did a Hog Reeve know just whose property the wandering oinker was? The owner would cut notches or slits in the animal's ears that had been assigned by the local authority. These identifiers became known as earmarks, the basis for the term we still use today when referring to currency. Now you know. In a future short, I'll share the story of how a pig changed the Massachusetts court system. But for now, let's prep the chowder.
I don't have any endorsements for making these videos, but there is a cost associated with things like campsite fees and supplies. This channel runs on coffee. If you enjoy the work that I do in creating these videos and would like to help out with expenses, please consider buying me a cup of coffee. It doesn't need to be much, just a couple of dollars. That keeps the Java flowing. I'll put a link in the description. Now, let's get back to the video. I'm going to get out the ingredients for the bacon and corn chowder. So I've got my crackers, I'm going to put those aside. I've got my dry ingredients, can of evaporated milk, bacon, creamed corn, and potato. The first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to peel this potato and rinse it. I'm going to do that and I'll be right back. So I've got that potato peeled. I'm just going to cut it into cubes. Taking my larger pot, I'm just going to put those potatoes right into the pot. Place the cutting board aside. Close my knife. And add water to cover the potatoes. We'll head over to the stove and we'll put these on. Let's go ahead and light the stove. Add those potatoes to the cover. When those potatoes are boiling, you want to lower the heat a little bit. If it starts to boil, lower the heat a little bit more. Those potatoes are going to cook for about 15 minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to take my cutting board, my knife. I'll use the measuring cup to hold the bacon. So I'm going to cut the bacon into small bite-sized pieces. Now I've cut all of that bacon into small bite-sized pieces. I'm going to put that right into my measuring cup. Not to measure it, but just to keep it out of the way. Place that bacon aside for the moment.
Summer's now past here in New England. We're getting ready for colder temperatures and the possibility of snow, so I'll be staying indoors more. Most of the snowbirds have flown south for the winter. You know, it's funny that we think of this as a modern phenomenon, but the very rich in Europe moved their entourage year over year to have the best weather. The peasants, not so much. Long before the arrival of ships on this continent from the Old World, Native Americans would relocate to best suit the weather conditions. Those living on the land named Nauset would spend their summers near the coast fishing and tending crops, then move inland for the winter to hunt and hunker down. In the late summer of 1620, a ship appeared in the bay, and the natives were apprehensive, keeping watch but remaining hidden. On board, the more than 132 people were hungry and growing desperate. They'd missed their mark on the mouth of the Hudson River by over 200 miles, and making the attempt this late in the season was simply impossible. The ship's master, Captain Jones, likely knew, based on the 1602 map by Bartholomew Gosnold, that they were anchored off Cape Cod. Recognizing that they couldn't remain on board for the difficult season ahead, the military leader, Captain Standish, decided to lead a group of 15 plus himself ashore on November 16 to explore and see if a suitable place could be found to create a settlement. Accustomed to the environment, the Native Americans were likely far more aware of what the Pilgrims were doing than those on board were of the land's inhabitants. On the bay side of what is now Truro, the explorers discovered recently created mounds and, upon further inspection and digging, uncovered large woven baskets with covers containing ears of flint corn. This variety works well for grinding. Now, I'm not condoning what happened next, but I understand desperate people do things that they'd never consider under normal circumstances. Such, I believe, is the situation with the corn. Let's try to put the scenario in context. The people on the Mayflower were running short on supplies. They'd brought barley and peas for planting, but had no assurance that these would grow in the New World soil. And they stumbled upon a cache of food that they knew would. So they took it, eventually totaling over 14 bushels. William Bradford tells us that they had fully intended to pay for it if the owner could be found. I think that's probably spin. They'd most likely just figured that they'd deal with the consequences if they had to, if they survived. Several days later, and further down the coast, the men were attacked by the Native Americans with arrows from the woods and retaliated by firing their muskets and chasing them for a short distance. No one was hurt. This was the first encounter of the Pilgrims with the indigenous peoples, but there would be others before the English-speaking Somerset walked into the village 4 months later. However, that's a story for a different time. That first winter, nearly half of those who built a settlement at Plymouth would die, because of malnutrition and related diseases due to poor housing. And those who survived did, in fact, pay for the corn they'd clipped and became friends and allies with the native people from whom they'd stolen it for generations until the Nauset tribe had diminished and was absorbed into the larger Wampanoags. Now you know. How about we finish making supper at the campsite?
Well, it's been about 15 minutes. I'm just going to go check the potatoes and see where we are. Let's take a look at this, see where we're at. Potatoes are done. Let me drain the water from those potatoes and I'll be right back. So those are all set. I'm going to open my corn. I'm going to shake up the can of evaporated milk, make sure that it's well shaken, and then I'll open that as well. Let's uncover the potatoes. We'll add in the creamed corn. Mix in the evaporated milk. Let's open our dry ingredients. And we'll mix that all in together. Let's add in the bacon bits. And we'll return that to the stove for about 5 to 7 minutes on a low heat to let it heat through. We'll relight the stove, turn that flame down low, and add the chowder back to it. Continue to gently stir the chowder to make sure that it gets heated evenly, and those potato flakes will start to thicken right up. If it looks like it's getting a little too thick, just add a bit of water. You can see that's starting to bubble around the edge a little bit. We're just going to let it heat for another 2 minutes. Let all those dry ingredients start to blend together. It's important to continue to stir the chowder just to make sure that it doesn't stick to the bottom. You can see it started to come up with a nice even consistency. I'm going to test that to make sure it's heated all the way through. The chowder's done. I'm going to add the chowder right into my bowl. You don't want to forget my crackers. You can put your crackers right into the chowder if you prefer. I like mine on the side. Bacon and corn chowder. I'm going to eat my supper, and then I'm going to clean up my mess. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment and give it a thumbs up. It tells YouTube that you really enjoy what I'm putting out. Also, if you've not already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. I put out a video on cooking or camping or the gear that I use just about every week. And if you have anything that you'd like to share, please leave a comment below. I try to answer every single posting that I get. I hope you have a chance to get outside, and thank you for watching.